That's it. That's it, Davey. Davey? If you want to learn how to swim, you have to jump in the water. Don't forget to feed Bruiser 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun. Whoa! I think I got some stuff out of your head that was nothing to do with navigating a ship. You sound just like a human. No, that dumb dog will never learn to catch a frisbee. You are inferior species. You dumb dog, buckface, scuzzbucket. Ha ha! Welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. We're your hosts, Liam and Rob, and this week we covered Flight of the Navigator.
Yeah. This just to be clear, this wasn't our choice. I think you've done very well with the opening quote there. Numerous characters, the whole Pee-wee Herman thing, which is very odd in this film.
Yeah, what was he called?
Was it Paul Mal or something?
Paul Mall, yeah, or
Paul Mall. I just read it as Paul Mal because I think of the cigarettes. But yeah, I'm not sure if they had an agreement or something where they're just like, all right, about 50-60% of the way through this film, I'm just going to do Pee-wee Herman. It's quite, and I think that's what everyone remembers. Everyone remembers the ship, and everyone remembers the weird Pee-wee Herman voice. And it makes for what is, I think, a charming film. Is probably the nicest thing I can say about this. Going back and watching it, like a lot of these films we've gone back and we've watched, I think a lot of them stand the test of the time. A lot of them, as we said, you go back and be, oh yeah, you should totally see this. If you didn't grow up with Flight of the Navigator, you can probably give Flight of the Navigator a miss, which is a terrible thing to say at the top of it, but it's still an interesting movie of its time. And like in many respects, it might be the most 80s film we cover, simply on the basis that, Davey, is David or Davey? It doesn't really matter. David. Yeah. The idea is that he's a 70s kid, and then suddenly, he's from 1978, and then suddenly he wakes up and it's 1986. So this film is constantly telling you, it's like, look how 80s this is, but actually in the 80s. It's like, oh, look at the toys, look at the hair, the music videos. So it is throwing the 80s in your face at every possible turn.
I think first thing we should say is, on this podcast, we cover the films that we grew up with. And if we get requests, they're usually requests for films that we've loved anyway, or we wanted to recover, things like this. This is one of the very first requests that we've ever had that neither of us have mentioned previously to doing. So this was an interesting one to go back and rewatch for one that, again, neither of us had it on our list when we first started discussing this podcast.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, because it makes me kind of question maybe some of our other kind of reviews when you go back. It's like how much can you really remove nostalgia from your opinion? Yeah, and the thing is, like you said, I remembered this film. I remembered like the main beats. I didn't, it's not like we did Aliens last week. And it's like, I didn't need to watch Aliens again. I was happy to watch Aliens again. But as I'm watching along, I know that movie beat for beat, almost line for line. Yeah. And then I go and watch this. I'm like, well, I kind of remember this bit. I can't remember that bit. But it's not like I'm like sitting there waiting for the next scene going, oh, yeah, this is my favorite bit coming up. This is just a film I saw in the 80s. But one that a lot of people have a lot of love for, as been proven by the fact that so many people have requested us to do this. And as I said, like, just to be clear, I don't think this is a bad film. But it's still one of those ones where I'm like, I'm not 100% clear on why it has this cult following.
It's definitely one of those standalone 80s films. You said the likes of Aliens, Ghostbusters, Die Hard.
Yeah, but they were stone cold classics in the first place, though.
But they grew as well. They grew into legs. Yeah. But you get Flight of the Navigator, E.T., certain level, Mac and Me. These random films that people loved. And this is the thing you pinpoint on. Like I said, because with the likes of Ghostbusters, we did Aliens last week. Aliens was the sequel. Mm-hmm. And Aliens just blew up into, you've watched this so many times. But with Flight of the Navigator, you have this one film. You have this one thing to latch onto. And like you said, it's just, like beats.
The thing is, I don't think that should necessarily matter in terms of looking back at a film, because say if we were to, because the example I'm going to use is the most obvious comparison point. And I think a lot of these films, as you said, Mac and Me, Flight of the Navigator, they're all chasing the same thing. They're all trying to be the next E.T. Yeah. And E.T., totally stands alone, but it stands the test of time fundamentally because it's a very good film. It's not my cup of tea. It's never been my favorite Spielberg film, but it's very well made. What you expect is this, peak 80s Spielberg movie. Whereas this film, it's one of those ones, it's grown a cult following, kind of like in the same way, I think when we go back and we watched one of our earlier podcasts was The Monster Squad. Yeah. And that's a great example of, I think we were just about able to remove our nostalgia from the movie, because you go back. And
one of us more than the other on that one.
It is a film you go back and you're like, oh, I remember this, and I remember loving it as a kid, but fundamentally, it's not a fantastic movie. And this falls more into this category. I think the point is, Flight of the Navigator was probably a 3-star movie in 1986. And it's probably just about a 3-star movie now. But it's just weird choices, because the first half of this film, you don't actually see the spaceship for the first hour of this film. Very little of it. He doesn't actually get into the spaceship.
You see this big walnut-looking thing, as they called it, for the first half of the film. It's funny as well that you say how it's trying to be the next E.T., because he looks like Elliot Mind.
He really does.
Oh my god!
And that's the problem. That's one of the issues with this film. Even if it's a decent enough film, it encourages unfavorable comparisons, because you put this on, like you said, he looks like Elliot. It's got the same kind of vibe, and you're just like, well, it's kind of like E.T., but obviously not as good. And even David, I think David actually gets better. What's the name of the actor?
Joey Kramer.
Joey Kramer. I think he gets better as the film goes on. I actually think when I started watching, I'm like, man, he's not great in this. But I do think he improves as the movie goes on. There are some wooden moments, and I want to give him the benefit because he's a kid.
Not so much his acting. What I like his. I can't even think of the word now. He's a whiny bitch to begin with. He is a completely whiny bitch to begin with.
I really want to know what word you're going for. Something a lot more subtle, I can imagine, than whiny bitch.
No,
he is a bit of a whiny bitch, though.
Not his personality. Yes, I suppose his personality improves. He gets happier as he's going through. But at the beginning, he's just a whiny little bitch.
Yeah, he's not the most likable kid in the world, and which is a bit of a problem when you basically spend the entire film with him. But as I said, I maybe that was the issue more than anything else. I was like, is the acting great? Or maybe I was just like, he's not the most likable kid in the world. But as I said, as the movie went on, I was just like, okay, I'm warm into this. And as I said, the relationship with him and Max, is that what we're calling him? Trimax, whatever the hell his name is. I actually thought was pretty good, and it's what actually propels this movie.
Yeah. Because
the first half, there's little hints that it could have gone in a much darker direction. Like the whole idea of him disappearing or falling down a hole, he wakes up and it feels instantaneous. But to his family, he's lost, 8 years, I think.
Yeah, so basically, I think we should explain what kind of happens in this film, and then we can go into the nuances of everything. So he lives in Fort Lauderdale with his parents. He goes...
Which seems like an odd... Did that seem like a weird setting to you?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there's many family films set in fucking Florida, man. No. Immediately strange.
They all love the water. Like wherever their new houses were, it was always on the water.
Yeah. No, it's just Florida. I guess you want to make the most of it, I suppose. But
so basically, he goes looking for his little brother in the woods. His little brother scares him, runs away.
Yeah.
David ends up falling down a ravine. He wakes up instantaneously, as Liam just said. It turns out it's 8 years later. And the gist of the story is he was taken by a spaceship to another planet 500 odd light years away.
Yeah, like phased on or something.
Which time being that it's 8 years. And because he's a human, he's not going to be able to handle going back in time. Now, if you haven't seen this film and you're listening to this podcast, I bet you can guess the ending.
Yeah, I can imagine you can. Yeah.
But it's basically adventures ensue while he teams up with the spaceship to escape NASA, and NASA being this really secret government agency, but the way they were making it out, like this doctor that just kidnaps David.
Well, he doesn't really kidnap, and that is the thing. You say the adventure that ensues. But I think you're overselling what actually happens, because let's be clear first, right? NASA is the worst bad guy ever. There's hardly a villain in this film. The idea that NASA, the boffins at NASA are the bad guys, this guy supposedly, kind of takes David, like he does it with his parents' permission. He gives him a whole bunch of super awesome 80s toys, by the way. That list of 80s toys is fucking
Let's be fair, mind. NASA can't even do an acronym correctly.
What do you mean?
Well, that robot thing, Ralph.
Oh, yeah. Ralph.
Robotic Assistant Labor Facilitator. Does that make sense to you?
No, it doesn't. But then nothing about Ralph makes sense other than they were just like, well, we need a way for him to escape. So we're going to ostensibly create a completely overdeveloped concept of this giant mail machine, this giant fax machine on wheels, which is there for two reasons. One, so he can escape. As soon as you see it, you're like, well, he's obviously going to escape in that. Yeah. And the other thing is, because it's like the mid-'80s, they were mad about just throwing in totally unrealistic robots into otherwise standards kind of, it was like immediately what it made me think of was Rocky IV. When in that, they just suddenly had this super futuristic robot. Like, and I appreciate it's NASA, but I don't think that fucking Ralph thing has never existed, ever.
You say it's NASA, mind. Where they kept the spaceship was literally a warehouse on the back lot, was it?
NASA, man, they are lax. That is another thing. Beyond the fact that they're the worst bad guys in the world, because they're completely unthreatening. There's no threat. That is one of the major issues with this film. There is zero threat, realistically, to David. And then on top of that, once he gets into the spaceship with Max, or Max is the spaceship, whatever, even if they did have guns, like, there's never any sense that Max is in trouble. Like, Max is just like, oh, I can just bail at any second. And there's never any kind of idea that, oh, NASA are going to figure him out and trap him or anything like that. It's like, no, Max is on top of things all the fucking time. As soon as he gets David, he's like, well, yeah, I need this stuff in your head. And then it's just kind of like, oh, well, are we going to go back to your house? That's about it. And then they throw in that bit at the end about the potential time travel thing that could liquefy him or whatever. But even that's totally underplayed. It's completely devoid of threat, this film. It's fucking bizarre. And like you said, right, let me stick with this. Right, NASA, it's just a bad idea in the first place. Like, we're going to get the nerds at NASA to be the bad guys. And on top of that, to make them the most incompetent version of NASA ever seen on screen is beyond as you say, like this intern, Sarah Jessica Parker, who just seems to know everything, despite the fact that she's an intern. Like, she's just walking about the door, passing on all the classified information. It's just anything goes. And as you say, when he just strolls to the hangar in this fucking robot, the guys are just scratching their ass. Like, there's two security guys not paying any attention to a fucking spaceship. Yeah, but also, and he just rolls the fuck in.
They had to unlock the door for the doctors to get in, but David, I keep saying Dave. David was then able to, as you say, to saunter in with nobody seeing him. Like, security on this UFO
is the worst. It's non-existent. Yeah. And I love that whole scene though, because obviously, Davey gets into Ralph, as he was always destined to do so.
My God, why did that
travels from wherever he's locked up over the airfield to this hangar. And again, it's a scene where nothing's happening. It's just him sitting in a mailbox, and they play the most upbeat 80s music to make it sound like really exciting. Like, oh, this is like an event. And it's just strolling across this airfield with no one around, not even like any danger that he might be spotted in this. Like, there's no one around. He just strolls in, super upbeat 80s music. And then when he gets there, it's just straight to the races. Just walk straight in. Oh, yeah, I'm there at the spaceship. No problems.
The dog barks at Ralph, and the guard goes, come on, mate, I'll get you your own food. Like, if you're a security guard and your trained dog is barking at that thing, maybe you should check what's going on.
The mysterious mail bot, which, let's be clear again, has no business being out there whatsoever.
Also, sorry, it took me a minute because that was a long old speech.
But I felt very strongly about it.
Did you mention how Ralph actually knew to go to the spaceship?
No, there's no explanation for that. It's like, is he driving Ralph from the inside?
He got into Ralph.
Is he programmed?
Like,
all I can think is somehow, has Carolyn, Sarah Jessica Parker's character, is she like, I don't know, programmed him to go to the hangar? That doesn't make any sense. But she is wearing a white lab coat, so she must be pretty smart.
The only plan that they had was for him to tell Sarah Jessica Parker that he's not allowed to go home. Ostensibly, he was kidnapped. Like, they just out of the blue, they've kidnapped this kid. They're not sending him home, but they're not telling the parents.
That's the worst thing they do. Like, they don't really kidnap him. They're just making excuses to keep him longer, even when they're on the phone. It never feels particularly nefarious.
No.
Like, and it's hard to be nefarious. Like, when they're in a room and they're so incompetent, like they're supposedly reading his mind with super 80s computers. And let's be clear, the largest fucking fax machine I'm not convinced that fax machine ever existed. Now, they somehow are printing an image of what he's seeing in what's in his brain. So it's like a picture of the spaceship. And this fucking print is I don't know what's the biggest one, like A1 or A, yeah. I don't know which way it goes. But it's like poster sized. I have never, ever seen a fax machine that big, especially when that is connected to a child's brain. But they just passed it all off with just kind of 80s sci-fi like words. It's all just kind of like a word jumble. They just like, all right, we're going to pick up kind of computer words and we're just going to carpet bomb them throughout this whole scene so that people don't really know what's going on, because back in 1986, nobody had a computer anyway. So when somebody says downloading, they're like, oh, yeah, they're downloading his thoughts. That sounds pretty legit to me. So you just fucking go with it because it's 86. But of course, it's aged like, well, a bit of a turd, to be honest.
Do you know when he comes back from the ravine and he's introduced to his parents again after 8 years?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recognize who the younger older brother is?
Yeah, that's Lewis from Teen Wolf, isn't it?
Yeah.
The lamest character in Teen Wolf is now possibly the lamest character in this film as well.
But
although he has a fucking, I'll give him the benefit that I was going to say the same thing. He has that shirt. The shirt's amazing,
and he's got the sleeves rolled up, and it looks like they're actually clasped as well, so they don't roll down, like buttoned up. Oh. Well,
the thing is that immediately, though, regardless of what he said on screen, that shirt alone made him so much more interesting than he was in Teen Wolf. Because in Teen Wolf, we mentioned in the podcast about Teen Wolf that there's every chance that there are cutscenes and that he had more to do in the original script. But he's a bit of a wet blanket. He doesn't really add anything to the story other than to be slightly scared of Scott. But at least in this film, he has the shirt. And it is just another one of those kind of, I think they made that point. It's like, what is the most 80s thing we can find? And you know it's vintage because this is the most 80s thing we can find in the 80s. So, yeah, I think that adds something to the film, at least. Well, it works as a kind of time capsule, if nothing else.
Giving him just the shirt, makes him better than he was in Teen Wolf. But my God, that guy cannot light a firework.
No, how the fuck? It's still, first instance, I'm not sure why they've got so many fucking fireworks. Well, there's so many fireworks just hanging around the house.
I'm wondering if they just hinted that they were the fireworks, because they said they were going to light David's fireworks at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, so they're trying
to hint, and then they never got rid of any of his stuff. So they hinted that his fireworks just left, and that's probably why some of them didn't like, because they're 8 years old. But
no, I appreciate that.
You see him mess around with a match trying to light them. And when he finally gets it lit and everyone comes out of the house and they're going, oh, can you see him yet? He's holding a lighting wand.
Yeah. Again, the problem with it is that usually it's going to keep coming back to this, the lack of threat. Because usually if somebody's messing up with a match or a light or something, it's because something terrible is about to happen. The clock is ticking, their hands are sweating. It's like, oh, I'm fucking up the matches. I can't do this. But no, he's just there on the roof. He's got I don't care what they say. The ship is going past. It can just wait round. There's no actual danger. He can just take his time, light a fucking match, set off the fireworks. He makes an absolute fucking pig's ear of it. But again, because they've got to make ostensibly nothing look exciting. Because that is the issue with it, isn't it?
If NASA came to you and said, oh, Dr. So-and-so we're not allowing you to leave the house, fuck off. It's my house.
Yeah. That is the other, at least with E.T., and I know they removed the guns in later versions, but you had the kind of nefarious looking FBI or secret agents, secret services, whatever kind of thing, where you're like, well, I'm not quite sure who these are. They show up, they're wearing sunglasses, their cars might be blacked out, something along those lines. But like you said, if you're at home and some knocks on the door and it's like, hi, I'm from NASA. It's like, okay, great. You've got to stay inside. Go fuck yourself. What kind of power do NASA have over everyday folk? I'm guessing it's fuck and all. But yeah, it's bizarre. But it keeps coming back to what they needed at the if they had added some kind of additional agency into the mix. It makes sense that it's NASA because it's a spaceship. But if you have the traditional, mysterious Secret Service guy who's like, oh, this is in the best interest of the United States, we're still talking kind of in the middle of the tail end of the Cold War. It's, we've got to keep this from the Russians. This is the spaceship. We can't let it go to any other country. It's if you add that, then it adds a bit of bite to things. But because that isn't there, it's just NASA. And again, they're just not threatening. I don't know, man. Super weird, super weird. And I guess the other issue with this film, which you can probably get away with a lot of that at the time, because fundamentally what this film is an effects movie. And because it's not
that ship is fantastic.
The ship is still fantastic, but of course, if you're watching it now, it's impressive for 1986 for sure, but it's not impressive now.
But that's the first use of CGI, really. Like one of the first uses of CGI. And you've got to think, the way they did the whole metal moving and the whole liquidization thing, that's what, 4 or 5 years before Terminator 2?
Yeah, I mean, was the first use of CGI on screen young Sherlock Holmes? Like it was it was like a... Was it no? It was like a scene with like a mirror. A mirror comes to life. I think it's young Sherlock Holmes. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Like I said, according to we'll get into it in facts. This is one of the first, if not.
It's one of the first for sure, 100%.
Yeah,
but
I still think, even today, I still think it holds up. I think it looks really well. The way the ship flies in this looks better than the dropship in Aliens last week. And you can't put the two together, I know, because the one is modelled, the other one is. Generated, but I think it looks really good the way the ship moves.
No, I completely agree. I guess the point is, beyond you watching it and going, "Oh, this holds up better than I thought it would." It's just invariably it doesn't have the same impact. Like it's a movie of its time in every element. As I said, the fact that it's so obsessed with pointing out the fact that this is the 80s, because of course you're seeing this through David's eyes, and it keeps telling you, it's like, oh, look how different this is to 1978. And then the second layer, I really think, for this film is the fact that it's when you would have seen it back in 86, you would have been like, I've never seen anything like this ship before. But of course, we have now. We've seen 1,000,001 things like that. Yeah. And like you said, it's still impressive for the time, but it's not impressive in and of itself if you're watching it in 2021. So you're losing another layer. So as I said, the charm remains, the relationships are still pretty strong. And as I said, David does get better as the movie goes on. But it was rewatching it, I was constantly thinking, it's like, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to be paying attention to here. Like, is it all about the relationship? Is there supposed to be a threat? And it didn't, I never quite got a vibe for it either way.
You say about relationships, right? If your 12-year-old son came back after 8 years, would you show a little bit more emotion than what they showed?
They didn't seem particularly surprised, considering what was, a miracle. It's a miracle. Like, if you're dead, because he's been presumed dead now for
after 8 years, he'd have to be, wouldn't he?
So it's a miracle if he just comes back after 8 years. It's a miracle. If he comes back and he's still 12, Jesus fucking sent him. This is insane. And that is, I understand why they didn't go further down this route, but that, as I said, the first half of the film is more about him finding the spaceship and the whole mystery of it. And I actually preferred the first half, funny enough.
And I was really surprised at how long it took for him to get into the spaceship, because as I remember this film going on, the whole thing you think about this film is he disappears, he comes back, he goes to NASA, he gets in the spaceship, and then the rest of the film carries on. But the fact he didn't actually get into the spaceship until the 50-minute mark.
No, it's a bit of a surprise. And as I said, there is some interesting stuff. And they do hint it, because as a kid, if you're a 12-year-old kid and you go into a ravine, you fall over, you knock your head, and you're like, oh, well, that's weird. Of course, just be clear, there's some very 80s parenting before that, where they're like, oh, yeah, your 8-year-old brother, he's just walking back from the woods. And there's not a path. He's just, as far as I can tell, in the fucking woods amongst the trees.
If you see the end of the film, when David walks back, he's crossed over a railway line.
Yeah.
But at some point, the 8-year-old boy on his own is going to have to cross over that railway line.
It's very 80s parenting. But when he comes back and suddenly his house isn't his house, his parents aren't there, it is a kid's worst nightmare. You know, obviously he's a bit older than when you think when you're really young, 4 or 5 kind of thing. The worst thing in the world is the idea of losing your mum or your dad, in fucking Tesco or something. But, if for a 12-year-old kid to come home and it's just your parents aren't there, your house isn't what you remember, it's the stuff of nightmares kind of thing. And the idea of him coming back and his parents having to deal with the concept that they're 8-year-old kids who they'd probably given up on it. I know they'd kept his room together and stuff, but they would have, on one level or another, given up on the idea that he was still alive. And then suddenly he shows back up again, but he's still 12. Like, there's a really interesting dynamic there, which is just about hinted at, but then abandoned really quickly in favor of all the NASA and the fun stuff. And I get it, it's a Disney film, and you don't want to go too far down that route. But because they don't go down that route at all, as you were pointed out earlier, what it ends up is just parents not really reacting to the fact that their magic 12-year-old kids come back from the dead.
Because the emotion he shows in the hospital when he's talking to his mum, that's the emotion you think everyone will be feeling. And But then, so I appreciate what he's doing there. But then when you get to NASA or just before, the whininess from him, it comes back to the whininess. Like, he's just moaning and whining, and I realize his life has been ripped off from, like, Starsky and Hutch and RNC. Yeah. It's got to be terrible. Do you know what I mean?
It's got to be rough.
Oh my God, mate, just stop whining.
Well, yeah, and it's I don't know, man. It's weird how long, because obviously people going into it, they're assuming that there's a spaceship in it.
Yeah.
And you're waiting to see the spaceship. And there's some really interesting shots early in the film. Like, there's a very kind of 50s sci-fi homage, like the opening shot where you think it's like a flying saucer, but it ends up being a Frisbee. And then ends up being far too, like, the shot with the dogs and the Frisbees. Yeah. Like, I'm like, you're like, you think it's a flying saucer, but no, it's a Frisbee and a dog catches it. Then there's what felt like 10 solid minutes of watching dogs catch Frisbees. They fucking just leave that.
I love the gravitas they gave there at the end, though, when they're all getting back in the car and David goes, he'll win that championship one day. Like,
yeah. It's really weird because, like you said, at that point, you're like, wait, am I watching a film about spaceships, or is this going to be a Frisbee dog competition? Because it feels like it's going to be it's a Disney film. Yeah. It feels like that's the kind of film they would make. But even after that, you're like, okay, so you've had the one kind of, switcheroo on you. It's like, you think it's a spaceship? No, it's a Frisbee. Then they do a second burn.
The shadow.
You think, it's like an Independence Day. And you're like, all right, no, it's just a blimp. So it's like, all right, fair enough.
But the shadow of that mind gives the actual shadow of the ship as we know it. To begin with.
Yeah.
As it goes through, it's got the pointy nose and the back end looks like a beak.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought
which is cool, but you can get away with two tricks.
Oh yeah,
like, you think it's a spaceship? It's not a spaceship. They do it a third time.
Before you went to the third time, what I liked about the second time was if you watch it, a lot of them pause like they've been paused in time.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of them don't move, and you only think, "Wow, like, did I miss something before where the ship has gone?" Because I even thought at that moment, was that actually the ship? And they've been paused because you know about the whole time travel thing. But then obviously the parents are looking up at it and everything's moving. So it's that one is a good little.
It's good. Like, they're actually all pretty good shots. Like, I like the opening shots. Yeah, they go too far with the dogs and the Frisbees, but it's a cool opening shot. I like the blimp scene. I thought that was pretty cool. And even the water tower, again, it looks the part, and I think it does a good job of tricking you. But I'm like, man, three tricks where you think it's going to be the ship and they just keep pulling the rug from underneath you. I'm like, by the third time, I'm like, all right, guys, let's stop fucking around. Let's see the ship. And then, of course, when the ship shows up, it looks cool, but there's no two ways about it. It looks like a fucking walnut.
Yeah.
It looks like a shiny silver walnut. But because it's so simple, it's just silver, isn't it? Kind of thing. It's just a silver walnut. Like you said, it does look cool still. It does hold up. And I forgot about the whole transformation scene. And I was like, that first time when it transforms into what looks more like, I don't know, like a traditional spaceship, I was like,
it becomes like a drag racer at that point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But what I like, when it shot 20 miles straight up into the atmosphere or into space, when they went back down there and they went underwater, David panicked. Like, you've just been in space. You've survived in space.
Yeah.
Why are you panicking that your thing's in water? And he's like, is this going to leak? Dude, you were just breathing in space. Yeah,
I know. And the thing, I didn't quite get the idea that when it goes up first into space, he pulls like a face, like very much a kind of Spaceball style, ludicrous speed.
Yeah.
Kind of moment when he's pulling his face. It's like, the G's are so much. But then for the rest of the film, that's utterly abandoned. That concept, like he's very much in this pod and safe from the outside world, and he just shoots around at 1,000,000 miles per hour. Everything's fine. But for some odd reason, that one shot when he goes up and he totally overdoes the fate. It just made me think of Ludicrous Speed and Rick Moranis as Dark Helmet from Spaceballs. But there are some odd choices. But again, I don't think they're overthinking it. To be honest, I think they're just very much in the moment.
No, they're not. It's watching it 30 years on. Yeah, 30. Jesus, is it? It's 30 odd years on now. Watching it 30 years on, we overthink it now. We have had time to do it. Do you know what I mean? But
in fairness,
they're not. It's a kids' film at the end of the day. We're bloody 39 years of age.
I didn't even know it was a Disney film. I never noticed that before.
No, it's the first time. It started off as an independent film, and it was bought by Disney.
Yeah. It was, well, we say it's a Disney film. It was distributed in the US by Disney, but this was very much. This isn't Disney as you know it now. This is Disney who used to kind of release pretty shoddy live action. There were some decent ones in there, but, mid-'80s, this is still before they kind of caught fire again. What was it? Little Mermaid was 89, I think, and that's when they had that kind of second golden period. But This is still off the back of their pretty ropey kind of era for Disney, and especially with live action stuff. A lot of those movies, whether they produced them themselves or they were just releasing them, it didn't have the same clout. Let's just say that. Now, if you see a live action film with Disney on the front of it, you're like, fuck, this is going to be legit. Back in 86, there was no guarantee of quality whatsoever. And so it proved here. But as you said, its links to Disney are, limited at best, truth be told.
A lot of these films where the young boy falls in love with the weird, for lack of a better word, outsider. Like Monster Squad, where you've got Frankenstein, E.T., Mac and Me as well. I keep going back to Mac and Me, which is basically a 2-hour long advert.
It's not. That's another film people have a lot of fond memories of. It's not a great film,
but what I'm trying to say is, I didn't feel the relationship between these two.
What, between Max and
I don't know, it didn't feel like, I know they were antagonistic, and then at the end they were like, I love you too, I'm gonna miss you. But it just felt like, well, no, this guy actually kidnapped him to experiment on him. It's all right, he's gonna travel him back in time, but this robot thing kidnapped him to experiment on him.
Well, that is the issue with this film, is that it didn't really pick either side. You either go it goes probably too far with the whole mystery at the start, and then subsequently doesn't leave enough time for the relationship once he's in the ship. And again, I've mentioned it 1,000,001 times, that relationship probably feels more legitimate if there is a sense of threat. But because there isn't, it's just, they're just kind of hanging around. And I guess once he, there's that whole bit when he scans his brain for the star maps, and I'm still not 100% clear why the star maps are in his brain. It's kind of half explained in the film, but you just don't really give a shit. It's like once he starts acting, I guess the idea is, like, and again, back in 86, is that you suddenly got this flying spaceship, which is, basically yours. And then all of a sudden, after he scans your brain, he's quote unquote quite cool. Of course, he is not fucking cool at all. He is horrendously lame.
Wait, you don't think there was a threat in this film? I mean, you haven't mentioned it before.
I know. It's just, I find it bemusing with this film. It's just like, and I keep coming back to that idea. I'm like, I'm not quite sure what the point
the explanation
of this film. Like, you've got a spaceship, but then nothing really happens with it, which is such a shame.
The explanation about the star charts, you probably know anyway, because you said it was half-assed. It was basically that they understood that humans only use 10% of their brain, so they wanted to see what happens if they fill up the other 90%. So they just basically just put loads of shit in his brain.
Oh, okay.
But they couldn't put the map to Fort Lauderdale in there, apparently.
No, that one didn't fit. He was filled up from all the space charts. So Fort Lauderdale wasn't. They do surprisingly, like, the whole idea with Max from The Office is that he knows everything, except for a host of very obvious human words. Like, he doesn't know what the fuck did I have it down? He
didn't know what geek was.
Yeah, geek was, what means feelings and stuff. It's like he's like the smartest machine in the universe until, he throws in any kind of, like, like a bunch of words where you're like, why don't you know those words? Why don't you know where the fuck Fort Lauderdale is? You know your way around the galaxy, but you don't know your way across, like, half of the United States. It's a really bizarre choice. But then the compliance thing where you just keep saying compliance. I'm like, dude, it doesn't make sense grammatically. It doesn't make sense. Like, I agree, something along those lines, sure thing, whatever, yes, sir. Compliance, no. I don't know, man. That whole compliance thing, he kept fucking saying it, and it never, ever stopped annoying me. Never stopped annoying me.
If you just call him Navigator and you're saying, tell me what to do, and then when he says something like, take us 20 miles away, and he just says compliance, take 30 seconds to explain to the kid what's going on. Like, look, I don't know where we need to go. You, as the navigator, you need to tell me where you would like to go. Whatever you say, I am going to do.
Yeah.
And then the kid
it'd be good, but I guess it's supposed to come as a surprise. But yeah. So like, it's like a bit of a bland robot until he, reads his mind, and then all of a sudden he becomes Paul Rubens, or very specifically, he becomes Pee-wee Herman.
Yeah,
it's a strange choice. Of course, a lot of the stuff seems quite lame because they're throwing in kind of rad and very late 80s kind of things which were considered cool back.
Nothing
in the
more
mid to late
80s than pulling up and asking for directions from the 80s hairband in that convertible.
Oh, that convertible was 80s as fuck.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even in a film which is awash with 80s. The only person who came away with it, like, there were two cool things. Sarah Jessica Parker, I thought actually looked pretty cool. She looks like she's really cute in this film, I think. And as I said, all the toys on the bed. That was about it. Everything else felt. I think I keep going back to that just because I love.
I know you want to get into the toys.
What was on there? I've got the.
It was the one Transformer.
There's a lot of NASA stuff, and I love NASA stuff now. Like, it's very much come back. All the T-shirts and stuff. I love all that. There's G.I. Joe. Space Turbo. That was pretty dope.
Yeah.
The one it was like a kind of handheld video game almost, but it sounded like a fax machine having a heart attack. And there's another thing called Constellation Finder, which I gotta be honest, I had no idea what that was. No, basically, I just saw Transformers and G.I. Joe
by the TV. There was like you said, the G.I. Joe and the Transformer. I think it was. They were the only two.
Yeah. They were both there. Did you not know what Space Turbo was?
No.
Oh, it's got like a joystick, and I don't know, it's like it runs on like a loop almost, but it's all kind of like super neon, and so it actually looked pretty cool, kind of like Tron almost. Okay. And like the gameplay, if you can call it that, is super rudimentary. And as I said, the noise it made to keep it running was absolutely outrageous. But yeah, it used to be pretty cool. I thought it was cool anyway. If you see it now, you're like, not so much. But yeah, that's the 80s for you. What can you do? But yeah, like, so he becomes Paul Rubens, suddenly becomes Pee-wee Herman. They have hijinks. They have the whole Beach Boys moment, which is admittedly kind of charming. And even at that point, I'm like, I'm not quite okay. So are you still just heading to Florida? Is this the whole gig? Is just you like, all right, we've got to get to Florida? And he's made it clear he can go 20 miles in less than 2 seconds. But like the whole shtick at the end of the film is them asking for directions to Florida. That's it. It's super strange. And so of course, like they do, like we mentioned earlier, there is this kind of extra level of threat added in with the whole idea. It's like, if you want to go back in time, there's a threat of you dying, but you never believe it's actually going to happen. And all it really leads to is a really cool, trippy visual moment when the ship flies through time or something. I don't know what you want to call it. And I'm like, all right, that actually looks pretty sweet. But of course, he's not going to fucking die. Like, imagine if they ended the film like that. It's like, oh yeah, shit, David died.
Max goes liquidated. Max goes, oh fuck, I can't come back here anymore. I gotta go.
Yeah. It's like, but again, it comes back to that, like, everything in this film is pointless. Like, they have this whole menagerie of like aliens, which kind of reminded me of the end of Predator 2. Like where you have all the skulls, but instead of that, it's like a host of cool like aliens kind of thing. And there is that one little cool alien, but he doesn't do anything. He just kind of sits there. He keeps him in his pocket.
And is he going to survive acclimatized to that planet? That's the problem.
He might eat a raisin, and that'll be the fucking end of him. Who knows? He'll get the common cold. That's it, dead. So I assume that little creature thing dies pretty quickly anyway. Like, because I don't think he's going to be taking particularly good care of it. But yeah, it all just leads me back to the idea that most of this film is absolutely fucking pointless.
And the fact that the kid's a thief. Yeah, he did grand theft spaceship, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Grand theft spaceship.
He kind of stole it from people who just claimed it as their own.
Yeah, and he was invited in fairness.
When he borrowed the money to ring his parents from Al, he used the rest of the money then to get a Nestle Crunch and a map. He didn't eat.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Yeah, just all right. That's fine.
I'm just going to use the change for nobody's agreed to that.
Herman just body shaming a guy. Typical 80s. It was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, that guy was a bit of a unit, but straight away he pokes his head out and he's like, he is giving him some shit.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's standing there like a bit of a fucking lemon going, doing the full hillbilly thing. But in fairness, he is looking at a spaceship, which has appeared out of nowhere. It's just... Sorry?
I'd say at first, I thought that was the guy from Roadhouse. You got that little plump guy in Roadhouse as well that always wears his shirt and tucks into his pants, so he's a
yeah.
And I thought it was the same guy, so I just fat shamed that dude as well because I thought.
Fair enough. Well, it does seem like he just sticks like that. That is, once he gets inside David's head, he becomes a bit of an asshole because fundamentally David's a bit of an asshole. I think that's generally where we're going here.
Yeah. There's ample time as well for definitely for the kids while David's on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But for the scientists as well, to actually go into the ship. Nobody seems to want to go up the floating steps.
Yeah. No, they see it, but I'm not going up there.
If I see this ship, and this is me personally, but if I see this thing that looked like that with the float, I'm definitely climbing those steps to see what's inside. If it looks cool outside.
Maybe they were put off by the finish on the inside of the ship, because I'm a bit of a clean freak. And I'm not going to lie, the first thing I thought when I saw the inside of that ship is like, oh my God, polishing that must be an absolute cunt. It's just, I just see it, I'm like, there's no way that isn't showing fingerprints. Remember the original PlayStation 3?
Yeah.
This is a pretty random one. That had that weird finish where you're just like, oh, you'd have to touch it and it would just be cut. Like, you couldn't commit any crime around that because your fingerprints were all over it. And I feel it's the same with that ship. Like, you can't have fingerprints because it's supposed to be a spaceship. At the same time, it's definitely showing.
Mine at the moment is the car. The kid, when we're waiting for his mum to do some shopping or whatever, he likes to sit in the front seat and get his greasy little paws on the windows on the inside. So when I'm driving in and I look left to see if anything's oncoming, all I can see is these tiny handprints. Like, how the kids get that greasy? And
I have no idea. Honestly, I just kind of, in my head, kids are just always eating Wotsits. That's just kind of what I have in my head. That is just causing fucking, because there's nothing messier to my mind than Wotsits. Like, they just stick to your hand forever until you touch something else.
Next time you come down, I'm definitely giving my kid a load of Wotsits and just sending him your way.
Jesus Christ. Imagine eating Wotsits on... Are we calling the ship Max? Is the ship Max, or is Max the computer inside the ship?
So yeah, I think Max is the computer, like the auto drive system.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because the whole idea is that, because like David is flying the ship, isn't it?
Yeah, because
so the ship is its own beast.
There is something like... Florian, what was it called? The name of the planet?
It was one of those kind of like cliches.
Okay. So I'm assuming whatever planet they come from, or he takes David to experiment on, there's actual aliens there, not just these because you've got this massive seat that David sits in that has two little bumpers and come out and accommodate David. Then you've got the actual manual flight system. Well, they're not putting that into something that will just be flown by...
No, so I'm basically thinking Max to that spaceship is basically what Siri is to my phone. Yeah. We'll go with that then. We'll go with that. All right, fair enough. I think we've actually covered most of the film because, again, so he goes back and, I don't know, he has fireworks with his family. That's it, isn't it? Like, there's the whole time travel thing.
Yeah, they get on the smallest boat possible.
But tiny little boat.
Biggest jump from the dock, like the water has receded.
Yeah.
You notice that?
It's a pretty serious jump. That's one of the more threatening things that happen in this film, is that jump from dock to boat.
Come on, Slowpoke, you're taking forever. And he walks up to the dock, and his dad, who is 6 foot odd, has to reach up.
I didn't really know, like, the dad feels like one of those guys like I've seen in a million movies. But obviously,
he is always in the background of stuff like that.
What's his name? Bill.
Clifton Young.
Like, I found he was in The Craft, is a 90s movie I love. But that was about it. And I was just like I know his mum, Helen, the first, she was in some pretty big films. She was in The Birds, The Witches of Eastwick, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But what I always remember her from is Alien. Ridley Scott's Alien, where she's like the super annoying character. And she always does my head in an Alien. She's like, in fairness, she's one of those annoying characters because she probably reacts in the most sensible way. Like, she's the only one panicking. It's like, no, dude, you probably should panic.
But that's what I know it from. The dad is just a TV actor.
Yeah.
Like, he's been everything. I mean, if you haven't seen him in RoboCop 4...
Mm-hmm. No, I haven't. RoboCop 4?
I think RoboCop, that was made for TV.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I like so many... Well, no, I think most people stopped at RoboCop 2. I stopped after RoboCop 3, sadly. But
when RoboCop 3 became a PG.
Yeah, dude. I guess it's after the cartoon's terrible film. Yeah. But, it comes back to the idea that this film, it's not too bad. It's charming. It just lacks that magic. That, again, it might seem unfair comparing it to E.T., one of the most popular films of all time, but that's the comparison it encourages. And the fact of the matter is, the director, Randall Kleiser, he just doesn't have the same kind of CV, the same kind of talent. Like, this guy who directed Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. That wasn't a great sequel. Yeah. He did White Fang. He did Big Top Pee-wee, which was a very poor follow-up, but no surprise he was doing that, I suppose. He did do Grease, though, and I guess the other one was The Blue Lagoon. So he arguably started quite strongly with Grease and The Blue Lagoon, although The Blue Lagoon is a very strange film. But yeah, he didn't do there was a huge number of films after.
There was a nice little nod to that as well, wasn't it? Because they were actually playing a Grease song in the car when they would at the beginning of the film.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like a massive musical guy. Well, I don't mind musicals, but I've never been a massive Grease fan.
I can see you in your T-Birds leather jacket there now as you're talking to me.
I did accidentally dress like a T-Bird, or a greaser, whichever one it is. But with the leather jacket, white T-shirt, and I was just like, my hair would go quite long during lockdown, and suddenly I was just like, you go outside, you catch a look at yourself in like a window, you're like, wait, dude, you're looking a little bit like this is a thing you're going for. So yeah, I had to abandon that pretty quick. But yeah, all right. So that's enough for the film. I'm not sure what else we can really say about it. So we usually facts. Do you have any interesting facts? I don't actually have all that many.
I haven't got many. I can reel off what I've got, but like I said, because this film was basically just a standalone like type of independent film. There's not much around it really.
No. Well, you already mentioned the fact that it was an independent Norwegian. It was made by a Norwegian film company called Viking Film, who actually went bankrupt, and that's why US. Disney picked up the US distribution. One of the more interesting, I guess, is 1/3 of the film is actually shot in Norway, which is you don't really notice when you're watching the film, in fairness. And the stunt double for David was Norwegian and didn't understand a word of English, so I'm sure that caused quite a bit of trouble. The hull of the ship, or one of the hulls, because there were numerous ones, is still used at Tomorrowland at Disneyland, Florida, as part of the drink stand of all things. It's not quite recognizable, but the actual hull's still used in that drink stand, which I thought was something of an undignified end to a pretty cool movie product, truth be told. And there is a reboot muted, but I guess we'll get to that in Legacy, so I won't cover that now.
I got a couple more. So it was Paul Rubens' idea to make the identity of the actor providing the voice of Max a mystery, and he was credited as Paul Moore, because why do you need him to be a mystery, but okay.
I guess he was quite famous maybe in 86 off the back of Pee-wee Herman and stuff. Maybe.
Was this before the Secret Cinema? It would have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
According to Joey Kramer, who was David, during post-production, the film's editors decided that some scenes needed to be reshot. So Kramer was flown back to the set from his home in British Columbia. He bleached his hair after photography wrapped, so he had to wear a wig for the reshot scenes. And it's no more evident than during a time travel sequence near the end of the film that he's wearing a wig.
Oh, cool. I didn't notice it, but I probably wasn't paying that much attention.
I was reading the fact before I watched the film, so I was looking.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
It says there's no more evidence. It actually has to be pointed out, and then people can notice it.
Yeah.
The second film to be released under the Disney banner to contain profanity. It is also the first involvement of Paul Rubens acting for Disney. A month after this film's release, he continued to perform as Pee-wee Herman, the Saturday morning children's TV. What else have I got here? Director Randall Kleiser brought his brother Jeff as the visual effects supervisor, who oversaw the use of reflection mapping software to create the ship's chrome-like appearance. The result was one of the first successful examples of what would later be known as CGI. So first successful, not first CGI.
Yeah.
5 years before T-1000. And I don't think I had so we've already said that Joey Kramer looks exactly like Henry Thomas from E.T.
Yeah, he really does.
Ridiculous. That's it, really. I mean, the odd nod to the autopilot from WALL-E,
Mm-hmm.
Like, he looks like him, doesn't he? Max looks like that autopilot from the film WALL-E and the cruise ship.
Yeah, I
And
see that, yeah.
they actually mention it. This one of the aliens was from a planet Pixar something or other.
Oh, okay,
that was
cool.
quite,
Yeah,
so I wonder if that's why Pixar did it.
Well, people love this film more than us. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, that's it, really. That's all I've got for facts, mate.
Well, the only other one, I mean, then this goes straight into our the soundtrack section, is this is actually the soundtrack, which is one of the, it is pretty good. I mean, it's a weird one because the stuff kind of very much earth-based. You know, you think of that opening sequence with the dogs and the frisbees and stuff.
Yeah,
it's a little bit on the nose, a little bit 80s. It's just a bit run of the mill as far as I'm concerned. But the main theme, which is much more sci-fi based, is by Alan Silvestri, who's done. You know, this guy did Avengers, Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, a huge number of like super famous scores. And he actually used, it's the first time he's ever gone synth, which, you know, adds to the whole 80s thing. But he used one of the world's first digital synthesizers called a Synclavia for this film. And, you know, it does add to that idea that back in 86, everything about this film felt really futuristic, very much kind of on the cutting edge. But now, because it was so of that kind of specific point in time, it just ages everything. So it's quite odd in that regards. But yeah, Alan Silvestri, it's not somebody I would have picked out as being the obvious choice, I suppose, to do the score for fucking Flight of the Navigator. But the score is pretty good for the most part.
Yeah, the actual Navigator theme is a really good theme. And like you said, Alan Silvestri's list is great. And
that's unbelievable.
To actually be pulled in to do as what it was at the beginning was a Norwegian independent film. Mm-hmm. You don't know if it was done before that or after it was. No
idea. And I the thing is, he must have been pretty famous already because, you know, Back to the Future was before this, obviously. But now his stock's risen. No, I mean, it is Alan Silvestri did the Avengers main theme, yeah? I'm not making that up.
He's done a lot of the Marvel stuff, yes.
Well, it's interesting because I actually think one of the weaker elements of the Marvel films is that a lot of the themes are actually pretty forgettable. You know, when you think of DC and you think of the Batman theme, especially the Elfman one and, you know, Williams with Superman and stuff, they have this really iconic, and even the stuff with Man of Steel, I absolutely adore the score to Man of Steel. Most of the Marvel scores are pretty forgettable, and it's really only the Avengers main theme that like truly stands out to me. Yeah, I might be a little bit unfair, but it's not like I'm like, oh, dude, remember the Ant-Man fucking theme? It's like, no. Do you remember the Captain Marvel theme? No. None of them have memorable themes. It's really bizarre.
As I'm looking through the themes, that's the only one he doesn't seem to be on here for, is Avengers, the first one.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking of like literally the Avengers main theme. Is it, you didn't do that?
I'm not recording.
I thought that was him. Oh, okay. Well,
hang on. What's this? Avengers Age of Ultron. Writer for themes from Marvel's The Avengers, uncredited. No, he's done like loads of the Marvel stuff. He's done like Captain America, Thor.
Captain America one's not too bad in fairness.
Yeah, but Thor's I can't see Avengers on it.
Well, whatever the case, the fact of the matter is the score, and in particular the main theme to this film, is actually pretty awesome. And I think it does elevate the film in many respects. In terms of video games, bizarrely, there isn't a video game based on this. But again, what do you base it on? What do you don't shoot anything in this movie. And they're not really chasing you by anyone. Yeah, so it's just unless you went and did like again, you could do like a space combat game and a kind of TIE Fighter or Wing Commander. But again, it comes back to that whole who are you chasing? What I ended up thinking of was, have you ever played the game Flower on the PlayStation 3?
No.
Well, basically, you're just controlling the wind, and there's like petals and flowers on the wind, and you just kind of idly control it about the world. And you could just kind of do that, I suppose, like almost like you know, Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Yeah,
you could do it, but Microsoft Mac Simulator. And you can just fly around the world. You can go down to the bottom of the ocean. You can fly up into space. Nobody's doing anything. Nothing's really going on. You can just fly about, and it's all quite nice. That's all I can think of. The only thing I will say is the coolest thing about it is bizarrely that I was searching for a video game for this, and what came up for no particular reason was 1989's The Wizard, starring Fred Savage.
Oh, I love that film.
Oh man, that's another. I guarantee that film is absolute dog shit if you watch it.
Right. I haven't seen that film since the 80s.
Yeah, well,
Otherwise,
I watched that film and immediately I think, oh, I had like the Power Glove in it. Another thing which looked cool but was absolute dog shit. And it was for myself and many other people, it was like the first time we ever saw Super Mario Brothers 3. That was like the big deal because people forget like Super Mario Brothers 3 was released 2 years earlier in Japan, like back in the 80s, that kind of thing would happen. Now, of course, you accept that everything's released day and date globally. Like the biggest video game in the world was out for 2 years in Japan before anyone saw it, beyond maybe a tiny little screenshot in like Nintendo Power, which is insane. See, I'm talking with so much passion now about the fucking wizard rather than this
I
movie,
wouldn't. So for me, for a game, I would go the other route with Max and however you want to do it, but. There's a game out at the moment, Pokemon Snap, I think it's called. Well, basically, you just go around looking at Pokemon, taking pictures of them. Mm-hmm. Well, if all the Max is doing is taking specimens to see what... You could be Max traveling to different planets, seeing different alien creatures. That would be the kind of game, just traveling around, just seeing... Do you know what I mean?
Or, if you didn't have the budget for that, you could just have Max flying around asking for directions to Fort Lauderdale. So if you want to go global scale, space scale, the scale of the universe, absolutely do Pokemon Snap in space. If you've got a limited budget, just have Max asking for directions to Fort Lauderdale. So either or, but yeah, that
is the only way I do, because like you said, there's nobody to shoot at. There's no element of danger in this, anything like that. But no. If the ship has been sent out to capture different species, take them back to your planet and do tests on them. The whole darker thing than they probably meant it to be for this kind of film.
Yeah. It's like morally, it's a bit of a grey area there, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the only way I would look at it for a game. Really, is more like a Pokemon Snap kind of thing.
That's not a bad shout. Yeah, I think we'll go with that one. I think that one's probably the best. So all that leaves is legacy. And in terms of legacy, I mean, again, people seem to really love this film, and it is the true sense of a cult movie. In so much, like, a lot of people say, oh, that's a cult movie. And I'm like, can it be a cult movie if it was really popular and people love it? This is a cult film in so much that it wasn't incredibly well received when it was initially released. It didn't do huge numbers in the box office, but it did find a home on VHS, on DVD down the line. And people have grown to love it. And there is a certain charm to this film. I'm not crazy about it, if truth be told. But it is one of those films where I can watch it and be like, yeah, but I get why people like it, why it's a thing. And this, as I said, that is what, I'm always a little bit kind of, I don't know, fussy about the way people refer to, because you get it in football as well. They're like, oh, he's a cult footballer. I was like, no, he's just a good footballer and people like him. That doesn't make him a cult footballer. You kind of need to be a bit shit, I almost think sometimes, to be cult, or you have to be completely obscure. Like nobody knows what the fuck this is, and it comes out of nowhere to become popular, like Donnie Darko or some shit like that.
Oh, see, I was going to go Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh, that is cult as fuck.
Yeah.
That is underground cult, because I would say even to the point where most people have no idea what the fuck that is. That is, well, I mean, that's quite possibly the most cult film of all time.
And all I'm going to say is just a little hint for sometime in the future. If you don't know what Buckaroo Banzai is, look it up.
Oh, look it up. Just watch the closing credits. Watch the closing credits of Buckaroo Banzai. It is because I haven't seen it before, and you sent me that video. I was like, "What the fuck? This is unreal."
So for legacy, so there's a remake being planned for a while.
Yeah. And I think that's we talk about that with other films. Like, do you want to see a remake? I think this film, there's enough there for a remake, and I actually think it's one of those films where it would suit a TV show format, because I think he could really lean into the whole, as we mentioned earlier, the idea that he goes missing for 8 years, and how he has to deal with the relationship with his family. Even like the whole, like the blip thing in Avengers, where it's like, your everyday life. What's it like going back to school? All these other things, and then have the spaceship stuff on top of that. And you can even have episodes about the aliens that come from different worlds. So I think there's mileage there for a remake, for sure.
Yeah, well, they've been planning a remake for a while. The last thing was September 2017. Walt Disney announced that the reboot of the Flight Navigator was in pre-production. Mm-hmm. And then Neil Blomkamp, who did District 9 and Chappie and Elysium.
He kind of went off a little bit of a cliff there, didn't he? In terms of
quality. His old studios were developing a reboot, but as of, 2021, nothing. Part of Legacy as well, there's a documentary called Life After Navigator, about Joey Kramer's life, because he didn't do much after that. I mean, He was in that film Runaway.
The Runaway with Tom Selleck. Yeah, he played his son.
And he didn't do much then after, except get caught a couple of times for drug offences, driving offences, or the craziest one is getting arrested for armed robbery. Whilst
yeah. He got 2 years for a bank robbery.
Dressed up in disguise. Now, that's all they say is dressed up. I couldn't actually find what the disguise was.
Yeah, I know. There was, in some of the research, there was some, like, one of his earlier crimes was probation for careless storage of a gun. I'm like, wait, what's careless storage of a gun? It's like, we went to his house and he had a gun in the toaster. So we had to take him to prison because nobody keeps a gun in a toaster. You can't be trusted. But yeah, it was the same thing as you say. It's like, okay, he's robbed a bank, but they've said so specifically in a disguise. And what, like,
I want to know what the disguise is.
Yeah. Has he gone as like Woody from Toy Story or something? Like, it sounds like it could be a really fun story. As long as nobody got fucking shot, which sounds like it isn't the case. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Like Joey Kramer, it sounds like one of those classic things. You know, he had this like little moment of like superstardom, and then it just never quite took off. And then his life, obviously, he's had some issues, but he is back acting now. He's got 2 roles coming up in this year, funny enough. So he is back on the screen in one form or another.
The man who committed the robbery was wearing a disguise, a wig with almost shoulder-length scraggly hair and a bandana on top, sunglasses, a dark jacket with a large reddish design on the back of it, and a black shoulder bag.
So not Woody from Toy Story.
Not Woody from Toy Story, no.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds like he was dressed up as Axel. I was going to say Axel Foley. Axel Rose.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think you've seen Beverly Hills Cop, dude. Yeah, it's one of those odd ones because it was a few years ago that it felt like Neil Blomkamp off the back of District 9 when he really had a lot of heat, where he's made this kind of 30 million sci-fi movie and made it look like a film which cost 100 million. Obviously, it was really interesting, set in South Africa. And it was like he was attached to an Aliens, was it Alien 5 they were going to do, where they were going to bring back Sigourney Weaver. And obviously he was linked to this. But then, of course, he made Elysium, which looked great on paper. That felt like a film that ticked all the boxes for me. I love the cast, I love the aesthetic. And then you watched it and went, it's not great. And then he made Chappie, and you're like, man, this guy's trying to sabotage his own fucking career here. Chappie's a weird, weird fucking film. I just, like, all of a sudden, all the heat is gone.
When you hire the South African rapper Ninja and his missus Yolanda, you realise that film's not going to go far.
No, it was almost like he got too much power too quickly. He's like, I'm just going all in on this. And obviously, he had some success because of the whole South African thing, but that was because there was an interesting premise there, wasn't it, with the whole apartheid thing. But then when he's just bringing in South African fucking rappers, which nobody gives a shit about, and let's be honest, you know, there's only so much of a South African accent anyone can fucking take realistically. So just ask my wife, because I love doing a South African accent. It drives up the goddamn wall. And a lot of that is actually down
Lethal Weapon 2. I was going to say, if you're not quoting...
and Lethal Weapon 2 and Diplomatic Immunity, of course. Another film we might end up doing sooner rather than later. But yeah, as I said, so it seems to have cooled down, the whole remake talk, but I'm actually pretty keen on it. I think it's a strong premise. I think this is one of those films where, it's not like you watch the original film. It's like Back to the Future, where like, don't remake it. It's just going to be worse. There is a better film to be made of this concept than the one that currently exists. So yeah, I'm all for it.
I'm up for a remake if they want to do it. Yeah, definitely.
I prefer to watch a remake than watch this again.
Let's go on to reviews then.
Yeah.
So you go first. Give it a star, and would you recommend it?
I almost want to give your bullshit 2.5 rating.
Stop stealing my answer, Liam.
So I'm going to go with 2. It's a strong 2. It's a charming 2. I can see why people like it, but I wasn't, as I'm sure you can guess by the way this podcast has gone, I'm not crazy about this film. I was never crazy about this film, obviously, because I watched it once when I was younger and didn't feel compelled to watch it again. So 2-star film. And if I was asked by someone, should I watch Flight of the Navigator? The answer would be no, because I don't think it particularly holds up, other than a few... as a time capsule, there's some interesting stuff, but no, not for me, thank you.
Before I give my answer, I know this was requested, and it sounds like we've slated this.
We sure have.
It wasn't really for us, as you can probably imagine, but please don't let that put you off sending in your requests for films for us to cover, because by all means, we'd love to see 80s films that we haven't seen as well. If these are 80s films you've grown up with, send them in and we'll give them a shout.
No, I completely agree, because let's be clear. Like, okay, it was one you suggested rather than a rando or one of our friends or a listener or something. But I had never seen 48 Hours.
Yeah.
And I fucking adored that film. Like, I liked it more than you did in the end, which is insane.
Yeah.
So, it's not, this film isn't a nostalgia fest. Like, there are a lot of films which we've covered, which I haven't seen for donkey's years, and we've gone back and they're still fantastic. This one, I just don't think it holds up.
So for me, it is a 2, and no, I wouldn't recommend it. There's a lot left on the table that could have been done for this film, and it's just
as I said, interesting premise. There's some decent stuff in there, but it just doesn't quite work, I don't think.
So before we say our adieus, it's for next week, mate.
Well, we're on much more solid ground here, because this isn't. I'm sure anybody who likes 80s films, somebody would suggest at one point or another, but this is one of my favorites. I'm going to go for Rocky IV, one of the most ridiculous movies possibly of all time, a secret musical, if ever there was one. And I know it seems ridiculous to say, because, Rocky won, an Oscar in his blood vial, but I think it's probably my favorite Rocky film. I fucking love Rocky IV. I mean, who doesn't love Rocky IV?
Of all the Rocky films, this is my favorite as well. It is that classic David versus Goliath.
It's not the best Rocky film.
No. But it's
now
my favorite. I will be annoying the hell out of my wife, because I am going to finish this podcast and start singing Hearts on Fire.
Oh, I mean, there's so many songs to choose from.
Hearts on Fire.
So if you get a chance, watch Rocky IV, and catch up with us next week. But thanks for joining us. Oh yeah, and before I forget, because I always forget, here's Rob telling you where you can actually find us.
Yeah, so we're currently on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s, or at Hey You Guys 80s. And we're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any emails, any recommendations, or any reviews you have. But whilst we're on about that, wherever you get your podcasts, please also smash the subscribe button. Yes, I said smash.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Leave us a review. And leave us some 5-star ratings as well, but make sure they're 5-star ratings.
Yeah. We're not interested in 1-star, 5-star. If it's not going to be 5-star, don't go smashing anything. Just leave your opinion to yourself. 5-star ratings only. But yeah, if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.